Welcome to the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Kimberly Woods, and I have my business bestie, Jenna Shriver, as my guest today. She is a brand photographer, founder of Together Studios, and the community mentor for the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. And I met Jenna through a Facebook for female entrepreneurs, and we connected over the phone and we realized that we had complementary visions. And so we started just this relationship and just started building relationship and getting to know each other. And then we started building with each other. And here we are almost 5 years later, still building together. Can't believe, like, here we are 5 years later.
Mhm.
But what I love about Jenna is there's so many things I love about you, Jenna, but a big one that really has to do with our topic today is your ability to embrace the mission to build something with God, no matter the challenges and no matter the time it takes. You're motivated by mission and not income,
Yeah.
although income is obviously important because, financial gain, because we are entrepreneurs, we are business owners. But that's your first motivation is mission. And it's just very similar to me. And so that's just a big thing that I love about Jenna. And I'm so grateful that God brought us together. And I just know that you're going to hear that from our conversation. And I believe that this episode is really going to encourage you as a pioneer. Just I believe it's going to bring clarity to you and bring pieces that maybe you felt confused on as being a pioneer. And I really do believe that one of the things it takes to pioneer something is to be motivated by mission, not the financial gain first. And so that's just one of the things I love about Jenna. But so today we are going to be talking about pioneering in entrepreneurship. So, Jenna, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on, and your words were just super encouraging. I really appreciate it.
Yay. Okay, so Jenna and I have worked together for a while now, and we're both familiar with pioneering.
Mhm.
And I think that we really discovered that. I think we really discovered that we're both, pioneering uh, over the last 5 years.
Yes.
And so maybe you are too. Maybe you're listening and you are like, oh my gosh, yes. I just recently found out that I am pioneering maybe over the last 5 years. And I love definitions. I know Jenna loves definitions too. So, the definition of pioneering is a person who is among the first to explore or settle a new country or area, to develop or be the first to use or apply a new method, area of knowledge, or activity. And so maybe when you hear this definition, you can relate to this word, or maybe you've even had a dream about it. Maybe you've had a dream where in the dream, God called you a pioneer. Maybe you've had prophetic words where people are like, you're a pioneer. And you're like, what's a pioneer? I think that's been a very common prophetic word that's been used. And I believe because that's one of the things that God is speaking, and he needs us to know, hey, you're a pioneer, and this is why you think the way you do. This is
Mhm.
why you've been going through what you go through in entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Or maybe you just know I'm a pioneer. Sometimes it's just that knowing. But one of the verses that really has just stood out to me on pioneering is in Hebrews. And Jenna and I talk about this verse. We've talked about this verse many times, but it's Hebrews 11:8-10. And it says, faith motivated Abraham to obey God's call and leave the familiar to discover the territory he was destined to inherit from God. So he left with only a promise and without even knowing ahead of time where he was going.
Mhm.
Anybody relate? All the
Me.
pioneers out there, anybody relate? Abraham stepped out in faith. He lived by faith as an immigrant in his promised land, as though it belonged to someone else. Woo! Does that not hit you, Jenna? Does
Yes,
that
it
hit you guys?
definitely. Yeah.
Like, because you have this promise from God, you have this mission from God, and you step out on faith, you actually move into it ahead of time. You have no clue where you're going because it's like, okay, you're doing this new thing, and but you're in your promised land. You're building in your promised land, and it feels like you're an immigrant,
Mhm.
like you're a foreigner in this
Mhm.
land, but you're stepping out of faith, you're building in this promised land as though it belonged to someone else. It's like I that totally explains pioneering. Um,
Yes.
and then it goes on to say he journeyed through the land living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, who were persuaded that they were also co-heirs of the same promise. Now, pioneering is also generational, and
Mhm.
it's you're building this generational, this legacy. And I think that's another marker of pioneering
Yes.
is this whole you you have legacy on your mind. You have generational entrepreneurship on your mind. I
Mhm.
think that's another thing that you can really tell, am I a pioneer? So
Mm.
let this just totally like speak to you. And then it goes on to say, his eyes of faith were set on the city with unshakable foundations, whose architect and builder is God himself. Jenna, have you ever heard that verse before? Or even maybe you're really hearing it for like in a new way right now. And it kind of hits you like, yes, that's me.
Yes, and it's one of those verses that I had heard before I realized I was a pioneer, and then once I heard it again in the knowing that this is my process and this is the season that God has me in, it hit me in a completely new way. Both the one about his sons being convinced about that they were co-heirs of the promise as well, and then this verse, both of them just like they hit me so deep that I don't even know I have words for it quite yet.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's just like as I'm reading this right now, and this is what I love about just how God does things, but as I'm reading this, I'm like, this is like the stinking framework for pioneering. Like when I'm
Yeah.
looking at this, I just feel like I'm gonna pull this apart and really just even go deeper into this whole thing. But yeah, I agree. I've heard this verse before and I was so drawn to it. And I remember just coming alive with it. But even more recently, it's meant so much more because I think I have more of an understanding that,
Mhm.
oh, I actually am pioneering.
Mhm.
And I think that when we first kind of hear, and I don't know about you if this kind of had happened to you, but when I first started hearing you're a pioneer,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, but am I really? Because I'm, well, at least for me, I know you know this about me, but I am really passionate about definitions and that we are really defined correctly. I'm not going to agree with something that isn't really. So I'm like, God, but I think when we kind of hear it at first, it's that first like mention, it's that first God laying that framework, that seed to go, you're a
Yeah.
pioneer. And then it takes us time to kind of process that and actually
Mhm.
realize that oh yeah, I actually am a pioneer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of, I know you mentioned that that was kind of like a process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So when did you realize you were pioneering?
I feel like it was almost like in layers. I feel like I maybe started to realize it for the first time in my process with brand photography, actually. And so that was probably about 3 years, 4 years ago. And then I was able to start Together Studios with the mindset and the knowledge of like, I am a pioneer even from the start and being aware of that.
Mhm.
So I really feel like I've been clearly aware that I'm a pioneer for 3 years, I think.
I love it.
Mm,
I think the same. I have a similar process. Just I didn't realize I was pioneering. I think
mhm,
until a free bird fly, and
right.
that's when and then you can go back and go, oh, okay, that's familiar of everything I've done.
Yes. Mhm,
Um, so I do think it's like it is it is layers of those of that of a process. So I think that, if you're listening to this and you're kind of maybe you're in the beginning of that. Maybe you know, God's been speaking to your heart about pioneering or someone's prophesied over you. You're a pioneer and you're like, but I don't really know fully like what that is or am I really? I just want to encourage you to not throw that word away
mhm,
just because it doesn't feel familiar or maybe you have questions about it or it's just like, well, am I really? Just let it process with God and know that sometimes it really hits you on at different times and you actually realize, oh my gosh, I am pioneering. So
mhm.
when was a time that you question, and I asked this question this way because I know I know that you have, because I have.
Mhm.
Um, so when was a time that you question if you were doing the right thing and if you should keep going?
I'm in the middle of it right now, just to be completely honest.
I love it. I love the honesty. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, honestly, this whole past almost full year, I've been asking that question because of circumstances with Together Studios. I've asked the question, and I think it's okay to ask God,
It
right?
is.
That like, is there something new you're wanting to tell me? Are you shifting me in a different direction? Am I supposed to lay it down for a season? Or, any of those questions are fair. And but I've been in the middle of that for almost a full year.
Okay, and can you give just a summary of what this is? This whole what is give a summary of Together Studio so they can understand because I think there's listeners that to hear the process and to go, "Oh my gosh, I'm experiencing the same thing." I want you to start just like kind of like pull out
Mhm.
points, but I want you to start with when you actually launched
Sure.
Together Studios.
Sure. So, just quick summary Together Studios is a workplace for creative business owners. And so we have like physical resources, studio space, private offices, meeting space, and small space for workshops and events and things like that. And God put this vision on my heart probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And He led me to open it in the right towards the beginning of the shutdown. I literally announced and things were finalized to open it the week before the shutdown. And then we officially opened in July of 2020. And throughout this whole process, I kept moving forward with it because God gave me confirmation after confirmation after confirmation that it was the right timing and He was in it. And I'm talking supernatural stuff that,
Mhm.
stories I could get into another time. And so I did, but it was hard. And I think every month I asked Him, do I keep doing this? Do I keep doing this? And it was really yeah, it was just a really hard season, but it was needed, and I know that God was in it and even in the timing. And so we occupied a space for almost 2.5, I think about 2.5 years. And um, we were told we had to leave the space. So we took about 6 to 7 months looking for other options and found one that seemed like it was going to work. And it recently just fell through. It's not working. And um, it's been a very strange experience because it's not like God gave me a word up front that this isn't going to work out, but I felt like I was supposed to still pursue it. It was very strange. So I pursued what I felt like he was in, but it ultimately ended up being a closed door, and having to process all the emotions of that, of, having my heart set on something and then it not working out, yet knowing like God only has his best. And it's this,
Mhm.
because this isn't about me. Together is not about me. It would benefit me,
Yeah.
but it's for the people that he has called me to build it for. And so my
Right.
heart is for them, is to be a resource and a solution for them. And so more processing the emotions of this isn't available for them right now. And that makes me very sad. But also knowing he knows what's coming tomorrow, next week, next month. And maybe there's a reason that it's not there for this season. And so I'm just really leaning into the truth and the promise that he has only good planned for us, and that this vision and mission that he's given me of Together Twos isn't over.
Yeah.
And so I'm just pausing, for a little bit, but we'll reconvene, and I really feel like there's a re-envisioning and a reestablishment that's going to happen in the next year. And that's very parallel, I know, Kimberly, with the words that he's given you, and it's always
I
like
know.
that. So I'm grateful. Um, but so that's where we are right now. And so I would say I'm really grateful we are having this conversation right now in this season,
Right?
because it's so much easier to talk about these things after it's all come together.
Yes.
But at the same time, I feel like there could be pieces of the story that get left out because you have had time to heal from
Yeah,
the
come on.
hard stuff.
Yes.
And I think we need to have those open conversations in the middle of the hard times where it's a little confusing or a little sad, to know that it's this is all part of the process when you're pioneering with God.
Come on. I agree. I totally agree.
Mhm.
And and I know, and it's like I think that it is important that we talk about this today, because I think that we can we can talk about it after. And like you
Mhm.
said, I think there's pieces that are out of it because you have healed and you've overcome and all the
Yeah.
things, and it's going
Yeah.
great, and you're like, "Oh, it's
Mhm.
here."
Mhm.
But it is really important to talk about, and especially just every way, but especially with pioneering, because it can feel it can there can be times of confusion of and what I mean by confusion is it's like moments of and maybe it's not confusion, maybe that's not the word to use, but it's like there's that tension of,
Mhm.
God, you gave me this mission and this vision,
Yeah.
and you haven't told me that it's to lay it down. Like it's not
Right.
at all,
Right.
And I think that
Mhm.
with pioneering, he, especially with a mission like that, God gives you the mission, and it might shift, it might change,
Mm.
like this whole re-envisioning,
Yeah.
and it might shift, but it's like the mission still is the same.
Yes. Mhm.
And it's like God gives us a mission. It doesn't mean just because there's shifts or there's, pauses and all that, it doesn't mean that, oh, okay, well, this is over. And I think that other pioneers need to know that,
Yeah.
because I think that sometimes, I know for me, with my first, really, I would say my first mission that God gave me, that I didn't even realize, but was the franchise.
Mhm.
And I I didn't know anything about, really following God's voice and building with him. And so I just followed what other people did and what I
Mhm.
knew that you just do, and so I believe that my I sold it and I closed stores because it wasn't out of following this mission that God gave me. It was more, oh, well, this isn't working out
Mm.
and we have to, or, just different things. There was so many different decisions. And I think that, as when God is having you build with him, it's just you just build different.
Yeah.
Um, and I I think we've even seen this with Oh Freebird Fly. And if you're list, at the time of this recording, we haven't introduced the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur at the time of this recording. But when you hear this, we will have announced, the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur, and which started out as Oh Freebird Fly. Because,
Mhm.
you're going to hear about Oh Freebird Fly a lot, throughout, this podcast, throughout the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. And it it started with, this mission and vision, and it's been here, and we've been building, and we've had workshops, and we've supported and helped develop Kingdom Female Entrepreneurs for what, 4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
4 years. But
Mhm.
2022, you know, there was a shift, and it's like it paused. It paused for several months, the last quarter of 2022.
Mhm.
And, there's a re-envisioning, that reimagining of it. God said that,
Mhm.
this will be a time of reimagining, which was 2022. And so we've had to not go, oh, well, the mission isn't the same anymore, because the mission actually is, but there's a shifting towards new language and what God's
Mhm.
speaking and what is needed. And I think that even as when you're pioneering, you can start one way.
Mhm.
And then I think when you don't know these things, when you don't have support, when you don't have, other anybody else that really understands, oh, you're pioneering something, you can a lot of times maybe lay down the mission and just
Yeah.
go, oh, well, okay, we're shifting, whatever. But
Mhm.
it's pausing and asking God, okay, what are we still doing the same thing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And so we've had a lot of shifting. And I think, and that's what Jenna's saying, is that,
Mhm.
a lot of the things that Jenna and I have done have just run parallel with each other. And
Mhm.
Jenna is part of Oh Freebird Fly,
Mhm.
and now the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. And we've had to navigate these changes and these
Mhm.
shifts, but still hanging on to the mission that God's given and paying attention to what he's speaking.
Mhm.
But I think if, you're listening to this, and if you're a pioneer, I think paying attention to, okay, all right, God, all the things I've learned, all the growth I've had, all the ways I've been developed as I'm going. And if God shifts you, just embrace and imagine all that wasn't for nothing.
Mhm.
It's part of the story. It's part of developing, and it may even be a part of who you're called to serve, and so that you can serve them in a new way. Because
Yeah.
if, you know, some of the ways that Jenna and I have grown through all these, years of it, we're able to help others that are in that process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, during this time, how did you keep going? Just how, what was your process with being able to just keep going with the mission that God's given you and really processing with him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, well, what's motivated me to keep
Yeah.
going has been the mission and the vision that he's given me.
Yeah.
And the the process of continuing to press through, that's been hard. Honestly, there have been some days I haven't wanted to.
Yeah.
I've wanted to just have an answer and a direction, and I've felt like in limbo for a long time. And so that part has been hard. But I feel like the how I've kept going has just been because the mission and vision is so a part of me,
Mhm.
and just such a huge motivator for why I'm doing it, that I can't not keep going.
Uh-huh.
I guess it's as simple and as difficult as that.
It's as simple and as difficult as that. That's so true. Yeah, because you don't always yeah, it's like you don't always feel
Mm-mm.
like it's so much easier just to have the answer in the direction right then. It's
Yeah.
like, "Can we just move on here?
Yes.
I'm
I have
ready."
wanted to move on.
Yeah. And that another thing I kind of wanna even address is that sometimes when you're pioneering and you're in the thick of it and things are shifting and changing, sometimes you're going and you think, "Oh, I have an answer."
Mm.
And you get
Yeah.
excited
Mhm.
and relieved, like, "Oh, it's here."
Mhm.
But then sometimes what happens if it's not?
Yeah. I mean, that's our story right now.
Yeah. How do you how do you overcome that disappointment in the moment? And, what has
Mm.
kept you going with that? And I know it's, a lot of obviously with God and others and stuff, but will you share
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I feel like that part's probably very personal depending on what your personality is and your emotional needs and things like
Mm,
that. But I would say for me, I I do need time to process that disappointment and sadness. And part of how I've been able to do that is talking to a couple close people,
yeah.
talking to God, about it and just being super open and saying, God, I am really disappointed about this. And yet it, it might sound cliche, but my conversations with God go much like how I read David's in the Psalms of like, he's very open about his disappointment or frustration or anger or whatever. And then God always reminds him of who he is.
Mhm.
And so I feel like as I wrap up that conversation with him, it always wraps up in praise because it's like,
Yeah,
okay, God, I know you have the best for me. I know that you have the best for others. You started this with me because you have solution for people who need it.
that's
And I
right.
know that that's not going away. And so even though I don't feel like I have an answer in this season,
Mhm.
I know that those things are true. And I go, okay, I'm still with you in it and show me when it's the right time. Because obviously, if I don't have the answer right now, it's because I'm not supposed to. Like,
That's
I
so
I
good.
mean, I don't know what else to say
That's so
because
good, Jenna.
he will give us the answer when we need it. And honestly, from my experience and my relationship with God and building with him, he gives me the answer before I actually need it.
Yeah.
And so if I don't have it, then I must be really early to the game.
Come on. And usually pioneers are.
Yeah, and but the thing I've experienced is as a pioneer, I always my feeling, like maybe it's like a fleshly feeling or like a fear or whatever, I always am afraid I'm late to the game. And what God's really been teaching me is I'm always early, and that's why I feel late because it takes longer than what I expect for it to take to build or to take off.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of other pioneers I've talked to can be faced with the same thoughts and feelings and fears, and they have a tendency, like I feel like we could have a tendency to give up too early
Mhm.
because we think because we have this vision and mission and plan from God that it's going to happen in a year or it's going to happen in 6 months or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And that's rare. I would say that's probably pretty rare because when you're pioneering, it is a long-term thing. Like you said, it's for legacy.
Yeah.
So we have to be the type of people that have the character and nature to be able to sustain the vision and mission that he's given us and to be able to carry it out long term.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm.
That's a big one. Is to be able to carry it out long term. Yep. I agree. Um, mission, obviously, we're both really passionate about mission and the
Mhm.
need for it. Mission and vision from God, because that's the only way. That's the, I would say, the number one way that I've been able
Yes.
to continue is I go back to the mission and the vision that God has given me. And it's like, are we still doing this? Are we moving on? Has
Okay.
anything shifted? Is it
Mhm.
complete? You know what I mean? Like, you ask
Yeah.
those questions,
Mhm.
but also I go back to even, my prophetic words. What have you spoken over me recently? What have you spoken before? What are the dreams I've had?
Right.
Um, and then also even, just obviously I have people that I'm able to process with. And
Mhm.
I do want to talk about the fact that you mentioned, about how we're all different and how we process. And I think
Mhm.
that that is so important to be open with, that uh, how you process may not be how someone else processes, and the other way around. And
Yeah.
that like to be free to actually process how you do, and
Mhm.
that there's nothing wrong with the way you need to process. Like,
Right.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, like, are you a I know you're an internal processor, but are you external also? Because the fact that I think you're very pastoral,
Yeah. Mhm.
and you're very community minded. Whenever I
Yeah.
see you at any of the workshops, you are in the thick of it with everybody. Like, you're right
Yeah.
there in the middle of everybody.
Yeah, I'm about 50-50,
50-50.
honestly. Mhm.
But do you process with multiple people? Are you
Yes,
Yeah,
I wouldn't say, like, not many people, but more than one.
more than one. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, and then for me, I'm very quiet and more like private. And I think it's just because I'm a more extreme internal processor.
Mhm.
I maybe 75-25
Mhm.
is me. Um, I have to process a long time with God, just me. And then I finally kind of process with my husband and I have a couple of very close people that I trust that I can process with. But I
Mhm.
still don't even process a lot with them. I'm a pretty internal processor.
Mhm.
So I think just with that, even having the freedom to process these things in a way that how you are, because I think sometimes, you know, I think both external processors and internal processors, you can sometimes be like, it's not made fun of, but it's kind of like, "Oh, you shouldn't do it this way," or
Right.
you need to tell everybody everything," or, those kind of things,
Mhm.
like, but sometimes external processors really have to get it out, and
Right.
um and then even just how we talk to God too.
Yes. Yeah.
You can relate to being like a David, and,
Mhm.
like, and I I mine's a little different. So I think
Mhm.
just giving freedom to you need to process, but being free to process per like your personality. And that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
what I want to know, what are you excited about with pioneering?
In the middle of the hard season. Okay.
That question's actually funny when
It is.
I just said it. What are you excited about with pioneering? Nothing. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just It's exciting. Okay, so what are you excited about with pioneering, and why do you keep going? So
Okay.
answer that for me.
All right. So what I'm excited about in pioneering, like
Mhm.
I was actually telling God this morning, I'm really grateful that he gave me the experience of pioneering in my brand photography business first, because it gave me an experience to be able to rely on in the because that I'm a little further ahead with that than I am with
Yes.
Together Studios. And not that Together Studios has to take that same exact path or timeline or anything like that, but it gives me experience with God in the different seasons of pioneering. So for that business, I am mostly in a season of really thriving in that
Mhm.
area.
Yep.
So but I had 2 to 2.5 years where it was everything was established, the vision was laid out, the plan was laid out and it was trickle, like a very, very little for a long time. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that's kind of the season that I'm in a different way with Together Studios right now. But it gives me hope to know that like the foundation is laid, certain things are built that were supposed to be built in its time, and then it will all come together in God's timing. So that that to me does make me excited to know that even in the midst of this quiet, kind of challenging, a little disappointing season, that it won't be over until God says it's over.
That's right.
And then it will all come together and it will thrive. And
Yeah.
I believe that. I just don't
Yeah.
know exactly what that's gonna look like yet.
Yeah.
So I think the exciting part for me is, what is that gonna look like? And being able to partner with God to bring that to life and see that happen. So I'm excited about re-envisioning with him, but I do feel like for me in processing my disappointment season, I told him, I was like, "I need a little time." Like, since this
Yeah.
thing didn't work out, I need a little time before we think about reopening again. And I feel so much peace on that, that it's like, okay, take a little space, and then he will prepare my heart and my mind and my
Mm.
season of life so that whenever it is the right time, everything will come together and it'll be great. And then what was the second part of your question that you asked me?
And
How
why
do
do
you
you
keep
keep
going?
going? Why do you keep going?
Why? Why do I keep going?
I
Again, it
wanna
comes back to mission for me, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I
Mhm.
wanna touch on, where you because you're talking about your branding photography also, and I just wanna kind of
Mhm.
so the listeners know, um, you know, Jenna was I would say what, wedding family
Mhm.
photographer for what, 10
10 years.
10
Mhm.
years, and
Mhm.
then God had her, uh, shut it all down. When I
Yeah.
first met Jenna,
Yep.
she was in the middle right then, it was like, "Okay, you're gonna shut
Yeah,
it down."
I think it had just happened whenever we
Yeah,
met. Yeah. Mhm. It was very much like the scripture that you read earlier. It was very
yeah.
much like that. It was, leave everything you
"Will you
know,
trust me?"
trust me, follow me, and he didn't show me what was next. I mean, I
No.
think I had a year before I knew what was next, and it was wild and amazing,
Yeah,
and there was so much that he did in my personal life to equip me to be ready to be the type of person that could carry, these missions and visions from him
yeah.
during that time. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, and now she's, like, completely focused on branding,
Mhm.
photography, and strategy,
Mhm.
and she's an amazing brand photographer. She does all my personal brand photography, our family business, brand, and with Oh Freebird Fly, which is now the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. She's, does that, and I trust her completely to really capture the vision that God has, the mission and vision that God has. And I think I like it's I think that's just an encouragement to even the ones listening that,
Mhm.
you know, you experience that with your branding photography or your photography, and he
Mhm.
shifted you
Yeah.
into really who you're serving and what you're doing. Um
Yes. Yes.
and but it has just it's thriving.
Mhm.
And it's beautiful to watch, but you trusted God with it, even if it was hard,
It
and you
was
had to
hard.
process all those emotions of stopping,
Mhm.
and I felt that way when he was like, "Okay, we're gonna pause Oh Freebird Fly here for a while." And it's like all the questions that you start to ask, is this forever? Is this ever
Mhm.
gonna be again? What's going on? And I felt like I've been able to just be quiet with God for the last 3 to 4 months and just really listen, but at first it's a struggle, because you're
Mhm.
like, it's what you've always done. It's what
Yeah.
you do. But trusting God in that process. And, just something I'm excited about with pioneering is, um, just I really I really just feel like, I can see, I can perceive what God's doing in it. I don't know fully because it's like when you shift, with shifting from Oh Free Reply to the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur, you can have a lot of questions like, is this going to catch on? Is this, all the things,
Mhm.
what's going on with this? But I can't not do it. And I feel like that
Yeah.
because it's the mission and the vision that he's given, and I can perceive what is to come. And I
Mhm.
can't stop early. It's
Mm-mm.
like when you have that mission and vision from God, it's different than just doing something
Yeah.
without that, right? It
Yes.
changes things. So, what would you say to other pioneers in entrepreneurship?
Mm. I would encourage you that to just have an open conversation with God and ask him for wisdom about the season that you're in so you can understand where you
Mhm.
are and be able to fully embrace the season that you are currently in or the one you're getting ready to move into.
Yeah.
And because I've personally experienced some what feels like confusion because I'm here, but I think I'm here, and or I feel like I should be at another place, but that's not where God has me right now. And I feel like when I have the most peace as a pioneer, whenever I am understanding the season that God has me in.
Yes. Yeah.
Even if it even like right now in Together Studios, even if it is a difficult season, I have peace now that I understand the season.
So true.
Whereas before there was so much tension because I didn't understand what was going on. And sometimes that just happens, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's kind of unavoidable, but but at the same time, I think asking God for wisdom, period, but
Yeah.
then asking him for wisdom to understand the seasons and your timing, because I feel like it can be easy to receive that mission from God, the vision from God can be the easy part, right?
Yeah.
And then the hard part is understanding his timing
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing, because the thing is, like, we're receiving a spiritual thing that
Yes.
is not bound by time
No.
into a life that is bound by time,
Yes.
right? So for
Yeah.
me, I see this big vision played out in my mind and the mission, which is, propelling me to fulfill this vision.
Mhm.
And yet, because it's complete in heaven, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's complete. So we can see it in this complete form, or what we
Mhm.
think is complete form.
Mhm.
And then yet we need to understand, like, we are on earth and we are bound by time to a degree.
Yeah.
And so we have to partner with God and his timing to fulfill this grand mission and vision that he's given us.
Yeah. That's so good. I love it. Um, I would encourage you. I'm going to go a little further. And this is funny because this is like Jenna's, I would say this is Jenna's part. I want to encourage you to get connected.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is Jenna's, this is what Jenna would say.
Community.
Community. Get connected so that you can be supported, encouraged, and championed to
Hmm.
continue building what God has shown you. I think
Hmm.
that's a big, I think you need that. So what Jenna just shared is huge. The wisdom from God, asking, asking that and knowing your season and even
Yeah.
pressing into the tension when
Hmm.
you're asking him and you're kind of in the tension of it, of discovering what that is. But getting connected that's like, I would say the next thing. Um, and obviously if you're a kingdom female entrepreneur pioneer, connect with us.
Hmm.
You can find us on IG, uh, TikTok,
Hmm.
and it's the Kingdom Female Entrepreneur. And Jenna, I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Can you share with the listeners how they can connect with you?
Sure. Well, first and foremost is my website, jennashriver.com. And then I'm on Instagram at Jenna Shriver, on TikTok at Jenna Shriver Photography, and I'm on YouTube as well, Jenna Shriver.
Awesome. Thank you again. This was awesome. I love
Oh,
this
thanks so much.
conversation. This was so like just I feel like it's really going to encourage and um just support a lot of people that are in this same season. And if this episode blessed you, hit the subscribe button and share this with another Kingdom Female entrepreneur who needs the encouragement. And until next time, I bless your dreaming and your building with God.